Some call it the White Death, and an ancient riddle asks, what flies without wings, strikes without hands, and sees without eyes? Every year, more than 1 million avalanches fall worldwide. Avalanches are simply part of our planet's natural order. It is only when we get in their way that tragedy strikes. Utilizing unique methods, we continue our quest to better understand the dynamic power of raging snow. But the magic of the mountains lures us. More and more place themselves in harm's way.
My machine just moved over me and everything just started moving. And I just yelled, I just screamed, "Help me, God."
My whole life's flashing in front of my eyes. You go to inhale and you were just inhaling a mouthful of snow. I was sure I was gonna die.
They're not to be trusted. They're awesome, terrible things. They'll rip you to shreds. You know, they'll Maytag you. Something that we need to learn something about.
Annapurna, in Nepal, one of the most dangerous mountains in the world. October 15th, 1997. Brothers Jose Antonio and Jesus Martinez Novas, veteran mountain climbers from Spain, plan to ascend over 26,000 feet to the summit. Cameraman Alejandro Rocha is to record their departure from Camp 2 and then await their return.
Vemos.
Yeah. Venga, 6.
Recent storms have left deep snow on the mountainside. It is slow going as the brothers set off to establish Camp 3, some 3,000 feet higher on the peak. An hour after they begin to climb, they are just 2 tiny dots on the face of the mountain, as Alejandro shoots video from the tent. As he faces death, Alejandro captures a final self-portrait. But just as it reaches the tent, the avalanche is spent. Alejandro is astonished to find himself alive, but has little hope for his friends.
¿Estáis bien? ¿Estáis bien?
Like specters, they emerge from the white, eager to tell their tale.
Tranquilo, tranquilo.
¡Pedazo de luz! ¡Que nos pilló! ¡Casi nos deja secos, tío! Me quedo viendo para arriba y al rato una nube de polvo allá arriba en el alto. Y digo a Tony que se meta debajo de un serás, ¿no? Y yo también voy. Y en esto que ya llega. Y es lo que puedes ver en la máquina después. Todo el mogollón ese. Nos dejó sin aliento, sin respiración. Todo aquel polvo. La luz más grande que vimos hasta ahora.
El más grande, barriendo toda la ruta que sube del campo 2 al campo 3. Estuvimos debajo de la nieve por lo menos un minuto.
¿Cuánto la batalla de hoy de la mañana?
Venga, cuéntanos.
Salió un murmullo de la montaña. Pero apenas se notaba.
The following day, the weather got worse, and they were driven off Annapurna. Some 20% of the Earth's landmass is crowned by mountains. In the Andes, the Caucasus, the Himalaya, the Alps, and the Rockies, avalanches exert their terrible power. 100,000 fall every year in the United States, from Vermont to Alaska. And here, deep in the backcountry of Alaska, 3 experts are seeking to photograph the perfect avalanche. With cinematographer Steve Kreschel, world-renowned avalanche experts Doug Fessler and Jill Fredston are here both to trigger the snowslide and ensure the safety of Kreschel's film crew.
I realize the power of the avalanche, and I try to capture that on film. I mean, it really rouses people. It stirs in all of us something, I don't know, primeval. It's very interesting. But to get those images, I must go down into these dangerous zones where the avalanche is going to come down. And if I make a mistake, if I'm wrong, it'll cost me my life. So being with people like Doug and Jill, who are experts in snow safety to a T, that's what their main objective is, to make sure that I don't get killed.
I'm aware of the lighting conditions that he wants, and I'm aware of the kind of avalanche he'd like to have. But sometimes I feel like I have to do a little reality check, because there's exposure from crevasse fields that are in the run-out zone that people could fall down. You have avalanche potential if they're on adjoining slopes. And so those are the things that I'm looking at. First and foremost, I want to make it a safe spot.
When we go along this ridge to this little peak where that cornice is, just go right along so I can look out.
This is a good spot, isn't it, Doug?
Well, it's good so far up there, but this kind of concerns me, all these seracs up above as far as landing down there. We'll have to take a look at that.
This is the peak right here. That should rip out, Doug. I believe it'll rip out. Doesn't that look good to you?
I don't like it because of the crevasses and the exposure to some of these chunks of ice up here coming off. I don't think it's safe.
It takes several hours to find the spot that satisfies everyone.
Well, it looks like we could drop charges right in that little pocket there where the cornice is.
Doesn't that look good to you?
Yeah.
Lower her in there like it's my unborn son.
One camera is positioned inside a padded steel crash box, which is placed directly in the path of the avalanche. Timing is everything in this mission. The camera must begin shooting when the avalanche is triggered, or it will all be for nothing.
It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Let me know when we start.
Okay. And your mark, get set, and go.
Steve positions himself behind a second camera at a safe distance.
Detective one out.
Okay, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Several sticks of high explosives will be used to trigger the avalanche. Most avalanches are naturally triggered when the weight of the snow exceeds its ability to hold together, and most of these occur far from human eyes.
I think the usefulness of seeing avalanches in motion is that a lot of the people that we deal with in our avalanche workshops have never seen an avalanche in motion before. But when they see this thing in motion and they see the power that's associated with an avalanche, it's a wake-up alarm.
Like the snowflakes they're composed of, no two avalanches are alike. Even very small avalanches can kill, and the big ones are true monsters. They can attain speeds of over 200 miles per hour, traveling a mile or more on level ground. No place in avalanche country is entirely safe. In 1988, the Austrian town of St. Anton, which had not experienced an avalanche in over 60 years, was struck just after dawn. Houses which had stood for almost 400 years were destroyed in an instant. Remote areas in less developed countries are the hardest hit. The greatest known avalanche disaster took place in Peru, where an ice slide decimated the town of Yungay, killing 18,000 people.
They're awesome, terrible things. They'll rip you to shreds, you know, they'll maytag you. But they're also beautiful to watch. They're delicate, they're graceful, they dance. They're a double-edged sword in that sense. And they're not to be trusted. They're something that we need to learn something about.
In the Western world, most avalanche victims place themselves in the path of danger and see the mountains as a playground, beautiful and benign.
The interesting thing about avalanche accidents is that most of them happen on nice blue sky days. It's also very interesting to me that roughly 95% of the people who are caught in avalanches are the ones who triggered the avalanche. And really, the question isn't really why is so-and-so getting caught, it's why do they let themselves get caught? Because there's so much knowledge available today that nobody needs to get caught in an avalanche by accident.
The trap is set over a period of time. One snowflake is light as a feather, but the stealthy accumulation of trillions can form massive layers weighing millions of pounds. What triggers slides can only be discovered by digging into the snowpack. Doug Fessler introduces a group of students to the deadly archaeology of a slab avalanche.
And what kind of force is it going to take to rip it out? That's all I really need to know. So first of all, do I have a slab? I'll start feeling here, and I feel resistance as I pull down. It goes fairly hard to begin with. Now it's starting to go a little easier. A little more resistance again. And right here, it's a little bit easier. Right through here, it's a crust layer. Now it's very easy right in there. Another shear plane possibly. This is a nasty shear plane. Look how this stuff just falls out of here.
Shear plains allow colossal avalanches to be set off by the slightest disturbance.
Of information. We're corroborating the opinion we have about the hardness and the weakness of these various layers. This stuff is so weak, it just falls out. Intermediate faceted snow, the sugar snow. More people have probably died in the world as a result of this weak layer than any other weak layer there is.
These snow crystals can be more dangerous than dynamite. Fluctuations in temperature cause some crystals to lose cohesion and become slippery. These frozen ball bearings allow everything above to slide.
Down here. Unless I have my hand ready just in case this thing pops out. Okay, now we got a freestanding column. I want to make sure the ski is nice and vertical. You see how that came out? Just like it's spring-loaded. By integrating all of that information together, there should be a picture flashing in front of your mind. And the picture is one of the serious instability that exists from a human-triggered point of view. And so the message there is to stay off of steep, leeward, smooth slopes, because those are the ones that are waiting to eat you. And what I want you to do is on the count of 3, I want you to go 1, 2, 3, up in the air, and then punch your heels in real hard. Ready, Bonsai Warriors? Hey, 1, 2, 3, Bonsai! Good.
An avalanche on the move is a dynamic event. A slab will rip out new slabs, transforming, becoming ever larger, and triggering billowing clouds of powder. Fortunately, nature can warn of avalanches with subtle sights and sounds. But if you're hard blasting a 130 horsepower vehicle at 85 miles per hour, it's unlikely that you'll hear or see any of nature's warnings. Snowmobiles can swiftly invade the heart of avalanche country. Riders enjoy jetting up a steep incline as high as they can, unwittingly teasing a potential avalanche. The game is called high marking. Whoever gets the highest wins. These snowmobilers almost lost it all one morning near Kellogg, Idaho. A friend videotaped the action as a wall of snow came plunging down.
Go, Greg! Go, Greg! Oh, hacksaw, get out there. Hang on, Greg. Go, Greg. Go, Gregley. Go, Gregley. Man, that's a mountain of snow.
They would all escape unharmed and spend the rest of the afternoon tempting fate on other slopes. But in January 1998, 3 friends, exhilarated by a crisp, clear day outside of Bend, Oregon, were not so lucky.
It was all virgin snow. It was everything was just smooth and just real billowy and soft looking. And being the first one to make the tracks is kind of a thrill, and that's where you really get your adrenaline going, and just let the throttle do what you can with the machine.
And we could get 20 or 30 miles away from anything and see a lot of country in a day that was nobody else was around.
The snow just looked like a big pillow. It was just smooth and soft looking, and when you got on it, it would kind of fall apart underneath you because there was nothing holding it from below.
Both Art and I looked at this big clearing off to the right of us. Art took a couple stabs at it, and I watched him go up the mountain or go up the slope. He must have went up probably, I don't know, guessing 6, 7, 8 times. And then he came down, and I decided to go up, and I got up on top, and I got stuck. At that point in time, I was pretty much stuck like this, so I got off the low side of my sled and pulled down on my front ski. My machine just moved over me, and everything just started moving.
I was almost to the bottom and getting ready to turn around to go back up. I just got a big push from behind and snow dust everywhere. When the dust had gone down enough, I turned around and my snowmobile was buried to the seat and my legs were buried right along with it. And I turned around and I could see the ski of Brian's snowmobile, but no Brian.
Buried alive, Brian has little more than 30 minutes to live.
And then when everything came to stop, it just turned real dark. My eyes couldn't focus on anything, and I went into a very frantic time frame. After trying to get control of the situation and just calm down, I tried to move anything and everything I possibly could. I tried to move a finger in my glove, inside my glove, and I couldn't even do that.
And I ran up to where his snowmobile was, and looking around, and I didn't see any sign of him. It's about the most helpless feeling you can have. You know that there's somebody that needs help, and you don't have any idea where they are.
The snow was compressed to my chin like this, and I could move. I felt my cheeks moving and my eyelids. I could only move my stomach inward. I just screamed. And after I calmed down, I just remember saying, "Help me, God."
And we kind of started digging just with our hands. Within just a minute, we realized that wasn't getting us anywhere. We could only dig maybe a foot or two deep. It was just going to take too long. So then I figured out that I thought we needed a probe. And I asked Mark if he had anything, and he said all he had was a saw. So Mark took off with a saw to go find a stick or a tree or something that we could use.
When you try to search for something you can move other than your lips and your eyelids, you surrender. And I just remember surrendering, and I just kind of went to sleep. I didn't know what else to do.
We were probing close to the snowmobile and started working up the hill, and probably within 10 probes, I hit something that it had some elasticity. It didn't feel solid. And I told Mark, I think I have him.
Brian was seconds from dying of asphyxiation, not just from the lack of air, but from the extreme pressure on his chest. Barely a few feet down, he might as well have been cast in concrete. They reached him just in time and learned a lesson they are eager to share.
In retrospect, there were some signs, and had we been as educated then as we are now about avalanches, we probably would have recognized them. But
the basic bottom line, I think, is just common sense and the awareness, being snow smart out there. Carrying shovels and probes and beepers is a big factor.
And I would like to see the people that are going to go in the backcountry get just some basic survival gear and some basic survival knowledge, and just try to be prepared for some of the events that can happen.
Such events have been happening for thousands of years, and no one has experienced a longer or more grievous struggle with the avalanche than the stalwart people of the Alps. In the great St. Bernard Pass sits a hospice founded in the 11th century to aid and protect weary travelers. Today, the hospice still welcomes those who come to visit the ancestral home of the legendary St. Bernard. In earlier times, both the monks and their dogs quickly responded to travelers in distress. With their keen sense of smell and massive strength, nothing could stop the noble St. Bernard from locating avalanche victims. During the several centuries that the St. Bernard served at the hospice, more than 2,000 lives were saved. But the legendary brandy keg never actually hung around the St. Bernard's neck. The tradition originated with 19th century English painters, beginning with Sir Edwin Landseer. The last thing a hypothermia victim needs is brandy. In World War I, the Alps saw a more sinister response to the danger of the avalanche. When Austrian and Italian armies met here, each side deliberately triggered deadly snowslides upon the other. An estimated 40,000 men were lost in this lethal use of nature. Avalanches are intentionally triggered today. But for an entirely different reason.
Fire in the hole!
Artillery and explosives are used in preemptive strikes, releasing potential avalanches, preparing the mountains for another kind of invasion. Each morning before skiers hit the slopes, the ski patrol hits them first to make them safe. But for some, a tamed mountain is not a sufficient challenge. Extreme skiers seek remote places where the powder is fresh and alive. In 1996, 3 of them were shooting an adventure film that almost ended in disaster. Miraculously, they all survived. Others, filming the glory of unbounded snow sports, have pushed the margin of safety a little too far. These experts escaped with their lives. But near ski resorts, those caught in unsafe areas can find themselves in trouble with the law. Here in Loveland, Colorado, instead of going to jail, this avalanche offender chose to be buried alive.
Bye-bye. I'm kind of scared right now, actually, to tell you the truth.
Buried beneath the snow for up to half an hour, he'll have plenty of time to identify with avalanche victims. And retrieving him is great training for the dogs.
Angel search. That's good.
Easily the furriest and friendliest part of any rescue effort. Rescue dogs often arrive too late to save lives and end up being used to recover bodies. Humans on the scene are usually the only ones who can help in time. Therefore, avalanche safety schools across the country teach as many as possible the techniques of rapid rescue. Avalanche victims are taught various means of escape and survival, such as using swimming motions to stay on top of the slide, and creating a breathing space with their hands before the snow hardens. Radio beacons are a modern aid to fast rescue. A transmitter warned by a victim emits a signal that others can home in on. But the best defense remains avoiding the avalanche altogether. The danger is well known. Warnings abound. But sometimes they are discounted or ignored. On January 23, 1998, a French alpine guide broke all the rules as he led a group of teenage hikers and their teachers off of marked trails near Les Ors in the Alps. None of them were wearing beacons. Some of the children slammed into a grove of larch trees they had just walked through, their bodies caught in branches and wrapped around trunks. More than 150 rescuers combed the scene in a heartbreaking search for survivors. Yet it could have so easily been avoided. The group had discussed avalanches and had even watched a video illustrating the risks. But when some of the children questioned the wisdom of hiking that day, they were ignored. The accident gripped the heart of the nation. 11 died. 9 of them school children. It was the worst avalanche disaster to hit France in almost 30 years. 89 years ago, in the Cascade Mountains of Washington, disaster struck travelers who had never expected to even touch snow. Number 25, a Great Northern Railroad passenger train, is followed by number 27, Great Northern's fast mail train. Heavy winter storms trigger avalanches, causing both to stop just before the Cascade Tunnel. On the following day, the tracks are finally cleared, and both trains slowly steam through. The trains are diverted to a side track outside the railroad town of Wellington. There they remain, helpless. Crews work to clear the tracks, but for each foot they clear, another falls. And the peaks above are a looming white wall. Without warning, an avalanche crashes down from the mountains, destroying the cook shack where passengers had eaten the night before. The tracks ahead and the tracks behind are now completely blocked. There is nowhere to go. 5 days pass. Some passengers slog to Wellington for food and comfort, returning to the train to sleep. A few risk the perilous trek to the next town. Everyone else remains. Then on March 1st, around 1:30 a.m., the White Death falls hard from the mountain. A slab, a half-mile long and 20 feet deep, surges over the tracks. Rescue workers follow trails of blood in the snow to unearth bodies. Mothers, daughters, salesmen, sons, lawyers, ranchers, shepherds, and miners crushed beyond recognition in the frozen deluge. The final toll is 96 dead, with 22 survivors. This remains America's worst avalanche disaster. In Europe, the threat of such tragedies has hovered over alpine residents for centuries. Some homeowners, fearing what their ancestors called the avalanche beast, have built barrier walls for protection. A 17th century church meets the avalanche head-on, like a ship plowing through a sea of snow. One of the best protections is the natural one. Dense forests of trees can prevent some avalanches and slow others down. Yet years of mindless deforestation have left some towns hanging precariously on the edge of disaster. Today, as the slow process of reforestation continues, steel and concrete barriers do the work of trees. Although unsightly and expensive, they offer some protection, while the search for better methods continues. With their dense population and mountainous landscape, the islands of Japan are a prime target for avalanche tragedy. A devastating slide hit near Niigata in 1986. It was one of the worst avalanches to hit Japan since World War II. This disastrous slide would provide crucial data for scientists in Japan, prompting Dr. Koichi Nishimura of the Institute of Low Temperature Science at Hokkaido University to begin his research on avalanches. A computer model shows just how the tragic slide progressed. Here in Sapporo, at the site of the 1972 Olympics, he recreates an avalanche on a small scale to increase his understanding of the internal flow of snow. Tracking individual particles of snow as they behave in an avalanche is all but impossible. Nishimura's inspired substitute: over 300,000 ping-pong balls. The behavior of the balls will be fed into a computer to learn more about how hard, how far, and how fast an avalanche will run. Dr. Nishimura hopes to better predict how and where it is safe to build. In Juneau, Alaska, that lesson has still to be learned. As the city has expanded into several avalanche paths, Juneau is a disaster waiting to happen. Just past 5 a.m. on March 22, 1962, above Barron's Avenue in the Highland District, a fast-moving avalanche raced down Mount Juneau and smashed into the neighborhood below. Miraculously, no one was hurt, but there was an immediate public outcry. Yet none of this should have come as a surprise. Avalanches had fallen in the past, and Barron's Avenue lies directly in their path. Studies were commissioned, plans were made, but nothing happened. Mayor Dennis Egan remembers.
The city and borough of Juneau has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars doing avalanche research, doing studies. In fact, what we did was list high hazard areas right on the maps. So when folks see those and go out maybe to purchase a home from someone else and come into our planning department, they'll know that they'll be buying a piece of property that's in a high hazard area. Now, we tried to put language in the deeds when the property was sold and it was refinanced through lending institutions that they were in a high hazard area. But the property owners were violently opposed to it, as well as the financial institutions, and it didn't pass. In fact, we had talked about a program to buy the properties back, and the folks were violently opposed to that as well. It's the place they want to stay, it's the place they want to retire, and they don't want anybody telling them what to do. They know they're in a hazardous zone, but they've come to accept it.
This summer, I started in July, and I've now built this deck, and I'm working on this building, which I'm building as I think of it. I don't have an exact plan, but I know what I want. I want a hot tub right here. I want to be able to see that avalanche come get me. And I guess it's sort of a King Lear thing. Blow ye winds and rage ye hurricanes. I like the weather. I love the weather. It's everywhere.
Apparently the risk of dying in an avalanche is less than that from choking on meat, and I'm not a vegetarian, so, Whatever you do, wherever you live, I mean, people live in floodplains, people live in mud zones, people live in hurricanes. I went to school in Sarasota, Florida, where we waited for hurricanes on a regular basis. You know, there's no place on earth, I don't think, that is completely hazard-free.
My friends, they make jokes about it. They call this Fort Liston. And I get a charge out of it. I think it's pretty funny. And they say, well, we know you're going to be seeing the avalanches coming down. And I say, bring them on.
In 1972, a powder blast rocketed straight into the center of Juneau. Luckily, by the time it hit town, its energy had already dissipated. Many residents thought it was simply a fast and furious local blizzard. A look up should have been enough for all to see the truth. Experts say that it's not a question of if, but when the next disaster will happen. While some choose to live in danger zones, others must earn a living there. One of the most incredible survival stories took place at the Bessie G mine, high in the La Plata Mountains of Colorado. In November 1986, Lester Morlang was working frantically to build a snow shed with his partner, mentor, and best friend, Jack Ritter.
We knew the storm was coming, and we had to get this timber set in place before the storm came. That was the whole purpose, was to keep the old east portal open for our ventilation inside.
Because of winter weather, the Bessie G had only been worked 3 months a year. But Jack Ritter, who knew more about gold mining than just about anyone, had figured out how to operate her year-round. Yet this was the worst weather Jack had seen in over a decade. 2 feet of snow had already fallen, and both men were in a race with the storm. Lester was in the bucket of the skip loader, and Jack was handing him timbers when everything suddenly turned white.
When it initially hit and I come out of the bucket, I'm sure that was only a matter of seconds before I landed, and just naturally you put your hands in front of your face and kind of ball up. You don't know what's happening to you. But for the first few seconds, my whole life's flashing in front of my eyes, and I'm seeing things I could never remember normally, and actually seeing things like my son graduating from college, and you know, I was sure I was going to die right there.
Although the snow was packed loosely around him, Lester Morlang's odyssey had just begun.
When I come to, of course, I had my hands in front of my face and everything was packed, and the first things I could do was get the snow away from my face, because you go to inhale and you were just inhaling a mouthful of snow. And then, of course, I was screaming for Jack, you know, I just screaming and crying and everything all at the same time. I mean, it's trying to take your mind over.
Jack was already dead. And now, buried only a few feet from Lester, the skip loader's diesel engine was spewing deadly exhaust into the snow.
I could feel the vibration in the snow, and I could hear it, definitely hear it. I knew to dig away from it because I knew there'd be a big pocket of gas, for if I'd have dug into that loader, why, that would have been it.
Lester knew where not to dig, but which way was up.
And when I had my face free, I was kind of laying over on my side. I had moisture from my mouth, and I could feel it running across the corner of my eye, so I knew I was laying kind of on my side, head down. So I knew I wanted to start the incline, you know, to get back up.
What Lester couldn't know was that he would have to dig through almost 30 feet of snow, fighting cold, claustrophobia, and a fear so intense it sickened him.
Several times I go into convulsions, and I did throw up. It seemed like about every half hour, why, you had the dry heaves and some convulsions, kind of like attacking you. I wasn't thirsty at first. I knew not to try and eat the snow, but my mouth was drying out and everything, and I'd take a little bit of snow in my mouth just to wet my lips and spit it back out. Every second, every hour, every minute, there's something there wanting you to lose control of your senses. You know, I'm thinking about my family and the position I'd be leaving them in, and a couple times I almost thought my wife was right there with me because I could smell her perfume. It was just as distinct as I know it was there. I could smell her, and that was good because that kind of gave me some strength to know that somebody was thinking about me.
Many people were thinking about him. Word of the missing miners reached Sheriff Bill Gardner.
As soon as I heard, I knew that this was the real thing. I can't describe the feeling. My heart sunk, my stomach turned, and literally chills went up my spine because I knew what we were up against. This was a significant winter storm. We had snow at least 2 inches an hour. We knew that we had winds in excess of 50 miles an hour. And we knew that the site was totally isolated, that the only way to the site was either by air or through a canyon that was literally Avalanche Alley.
Avalanche safety expert Chris George was brought in to bomb the area, clearing it of potential avalanches, making it safe for the rescue team.
The road into the Bessie G up at the La Plata Canyon was already a serious hazard. I mean, just driving that road. Just because one avalanche runs doesn't mean to say that everything else is secured. You know, you'll have 1 or 2 people trapped somewhere. You send another 40 people in there. It's not secure. It's something we have to do.
After almost 22 hours of digging, Lester finally inched closer to freedom.
I could tell I was seeing a little bit of light, and so I was about maybe 2 feet under. And of course the adrenaline started pumping then, and I just started digging and beating and jumping, and I can remember just breaking out and just screaming, thank God, you know, I made it, I can't believe it, I made it. And then to get out in a freezing storm, snowing, blowing, that's when I got cold.
Bitterly disappointed, with no rescue in sight, Lester was forced to return to his snow tunnel for warmth. He attempted to settle in for the night.
I tried to go to sleep and wake up real quick and think, well, I was just in bed and had a bad dream, but a very sad thing when I did wake up, I was still in the cave.
Then, another avalanche hit, burying Lester for a second time.
To hear that crack and that sliding sound, and I just assumed it was going to squash me like a bug in my little hole there, but luckily it just slid over the top. The morning came. I knew, well, I'm going to get started as early as I can. I'm going to dig my way out again. So it was about 6, and I started digging my way out. Of course, I only had a couple, 3 feet of snow to go through. And I got out, and I just started, the only direction I could move was down.
Finally, in mid-morning, the winds abated enough. We sent in Chris George to do our first aerial surveillance of the accident site.
And we flew by the east portal looking for tracks. There was no indication of where that portal was. It was just one smooth angle of snow. I had absolutely no idea that Lester had gotten out and was at what I would say the foot of the mountain, which is quite a desperate descent under any circumstances.
I'll never forget that helicopter flying approximately the same elevation I was, but they were looking, I could look in and see them, and they were looking up at the avalanche. Of course, they didn't expect me where I was, and yeah, it made me mad. I was mad. They just flew past me. I thought I felt prop wash. They were so close. This must have been about a half hour later. I heard the thunder, what I thought was thunder, and then I realized they were dropping bombs on the slope to secure the slope for the rescuers. So I knew I had to get out of there. I finally got up and got behind a tree, and it wasn't 15 minutes I could hear the roar. It was louder than any thunder you've ever heard.
If the first two didn't get him, the third avalanche certainly wouldn't. Lester was almost to Junction Creek when he heard the sound of the helicopter overhead. This time, they saw him. He was flown 10 minutes away to Mercy Medical Center, where he was treated for severe frostbite. They wanted to cut off several fingers, but Lester held on. With physical therapy and personal strength, his fingers remain.
I can't express the mixture of joy and wonder that someone survived this. I mean, veteran mountaineers and search and rescue people were looking at each other, people were hugging each other, and we were going, we can't believe this is true.
I have read hundreds of reports of avalanches. I've been teaching snow safety for 35 years, been in mountains 40-odd years. To me, it is one of the greatest survival stories I've ever heard of.
It's good for me because it gave me a new outlook, and I'm a lot tougher than I was, and I appreciate things a lot more than I did. Like a nice warm house and a loving family. I'm rich. I didn't need to extract all the gold out of this mine to get rich. I know now what rich is, and I'm rich.
Experience teaches when we pay attention. Wisdom arrives after we learn. Winter will always come. Snow will always fall. All things obey the law of gravity. In the mountains, ignorance and arrogance can place us in harm's way. We have a choice. But if we remain unaware and the mountains continue to lure us, the White Death will strike again and again.